Matthew chapter 11, verses 20 to 30. Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." Now, if you've ever heard or read that verse before, I'm sure that you have also thought at times, I don't understand how your yoke is easy, because nothing is easy. Following you, God, is hard. In reality, we are the ones who make things harder than it should be. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow, especially when we feel like we are trying our best, and we are trying the times that we are trying our absolute best, and it seems like nothing is falling into place. And we just become distracted by all the chaos around us that we forget to cling to Jesus, who is the rock on which we can stand when it feels like everything else is falling away underneath of us. Larry Chell once said, "In the Philippines, I heard a local pastor use the following parable to illustrate Christ's offer of rest, and the response of people who won't trust him completely. The driver of a caribou wagon was on his way to market when he overtook an old man carrying a heavy load. Taking compassion on him, the driver invited the old man to ride in the wagon. Gratefully, the old man accepted. After a few minutes, the driver turned to see how the man was doing. To his surprise, he found him still straining under the heavy weight, for he had not taken the burden off of his shoulders." And I feel that just speaks volumes, not just to Christianity, but to humanity as a whole, where we will bear any heavy burden before we will ask for help. Because asking for help is a sign of weakness. It means that we are not good enough. And we just believe all these lies that the enemy whispers to us, that we tell ourselves, that we've been, whether it's because we've been taught that by our parents or teachers or other influencers, or where we've taught it to ourselves based on previous experiences. Because unfortunately, there are people out there that if you ask for help, they either say no and look at you like you're stupid and weak, or people who will say yes and then treat you like you're stupid or weak, or just do it lackadaisical. I know that when I was youth pastor, we had a lot of events that were sponsored. They were supposed to be for the whole church. And the youth group took on a lot of setup and cleanup. And in the beginning of each youth group that I led during the time period they were in that group, it was usually the teenage boys that were like, I don't feel like doing this. I don't know why this is my problem. Just because I'm young and can carry things that other people can't. And as time went on, and they saw how grateful that the older people in the congregation who physically couldn't help set up and clean up for bigger events, they would say thank you for taking the time out, and they realized that they were helping lift a burden and that people did care. It went from, I don't really feel like helping much, you got this, those of you who are enthused to do it, to wanting to help take that burden. In life, you're going to encounter all kinds of people. The only person that you can control is yourself. And unfortunately, there are so many of us, and I include myself in this, because I am horrible for asking for help, because I too am speaking this from experience, have dealt with, not just as a youth pastor, but just in my own personal life, asking for help and either no one answers the call or there's a lot of judgment. And when you're doing the work of God and God is impressed upon you to do something, and you realize that the job needs some extra hands, and you are met with either derision, mocking, or questioning if God really led you to do this, if you need help, or whatever the case may be, it can cause burnout to happen so much faster, and it can cause you to question, well, God, you said your yoke is easy. You told me you wanted me to do this. You said you wanted, that I would need help. And where is the help? We put so much burden on us because of our human experience that we sometimes forget and are blinded that we do have a God that is there to help us. And again, speaking of experience, the times that God has humbled me, where I've cried out to him in anger and sadness, I know I need help with this. I know you want me to do it, but I'm not strong enough. I need your help. Where God has given me strength of body and mind and spirit to complete the task myself or do it to the best of my ability, and then gave me boldness of spirit and a heart of compassion that if anyone mentions that it's not good enough or could have been better, to be able to say in humility and with no arrogance, this was the best of my ability with God beside me because I didn't have any help. If you would like it to be better, I would love to have your help next time. Let me tell you, you definitely need God's help to deal with those kind of situations, because our emotions take over. And see, that's not something to look down upon. It's not like we're supposed to be these robots that have no emotion. We serve a God who is full of generosity and compassion, who is so full of love and passion for his creation that he sent his only son to die on the cross for our sins. We don't serve an emotionless God, and he didn't create us to be emotionless beings. One of the biggest ways that we can help realize how God's yoke is easy and is to connect with him through reading of his word and prayer. And sometimes, especially when it comes in regards to prayer, we get so caught up in how we think things should be. And what I mean by that is, I know I'm not alone in this, where you feel this intense guilt because there's so much to pray for and so much you need guidance over and comfort, and maybe you're searching for like extra conviction to help you break a vice and to fight off a temptation, whatever it may be, and then you go to God in prayer and then you fall asleep. I have always struggled with this, where I will pray and really be digging in, and the next thing I know, it's an hour later and I definitely passed out. And I'm just apologizing to God because I'm like, I feel like such a horrible follower of you because I can't stay awake. But I read something recently. It was a quote from a Christian author whose name is Scott Sauls that completely changed my perspective. This perspective that I've held for pretty much my entire 35 years of life, that I am a horrible follower of Christ when I fall asleep while I pray. And this is what he said. Feel guilty falling asleep while praying? Let me ask you, how do you feel when your child falls asleep in your lap? I'm glad that's settled. Now, not everyone's a parent, but have you ever held a baby in your arms and they've fallen asleep? And if you haven't done that, have you ever been with someone you love and they are so torn up about something, and you just hold them or you comfort them until they have peace enough to be able to fall asleep. That's a wonderful feeling. God said in that verse, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." Just hearing things from a different perspective changed everything. It wasn't me being a horrible Christian. It's not you being a horrible Christian or failing at trying God for the first time. It's God wrapping his arms around you and taking those burdens that were keeping you up, that were stressing you out, and causing you to be able to rest in his arms and sleep. In John chapter 21, verses 1 through 6, it says, "Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there: Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, 'I'm going fishing.' 'We'll come too,' they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing at all. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, 'Fellows, have you caught any fish?' 'No,' they replied. Then he said, 'Throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat and you'll get some.' So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it." All it was throwing the fish net on the other side of the boat. Sometimes God is impressing us to do something just slightly different, and things would be so much easier. Maybe to stop being stubborn on something, and you'll feel a lot better. And sometimes we fight even those simple commands, because how on earth could that make any difference? Well, if the creator and God of the universe is telling you to do it, just do it. There was an excerpt of a story in Our Daily Bread in one of the earlier editions, is taken it back way to 1994. And it's told the story of Eli Black, who was a brilliant businessman. He was best known for 2 events in his life. Number 1, he masterminded the multi-million-dollar takeover of the United Fruit conglomerate. And second, he jumped to his death from the 42nd floor of the Pan Am building in New York City. In the book An American Company, an executive described a business lunch he had with Eli Black. When the waitress brought a plate of cheese and crackers as an appetizer, Black reached out and took them, placed them on the table, blocked them with his arms, and continued talking. The executive hadn't eaten for hours and hinted that he would like a cracker, but Black acted as though he hadn't heard him and went on with the business meeting. After a while, Black placed a cracker and a piece of cheese on the tips of his fingers and continued to talk. Several moments later, Black placed the cracker on the executive's plate and then blocked the rest as before. It was clear that Black was in charge, manipulating others as he pleased. When you play follow the leader, check to see who is at the head of the line. Eli Black, for all of his power, ended up in suicide. Jesus Christ, in all of his humility, ended up the savior of the world. God is saying his yoke is easy because it is. Period. It doesn't seem like that sometimes because of how we feel or what we've been through. For example, if God is pressing someone upon your heart to call or send a card to, and it's someone you haven't talked to in years, and maybe the last time you talked it didn't go well. All that's in our mind is the fear and all the different scenarios how this can go terrible, just terribly. And we're wondering why God would ask us to do something so difficult. But the thing is, we only know what's past. We don't know what's going on right now with everybody. We don't know that perhaps that person God has laid on our heart, God has been working on to be more forgiving, receptive. Maybe they're in a hard place where they need someone and God is calling you. I just recently watched an episode of a sitcom where there were two friends who had been friends for 50 years, ever since they were in grade school, and they got into a huge fight and decided to break up their friendship. And the one woman's daughter-in-law encouraged her to meet with her friend, because the whole reason why her friend was in town was because her mother passed away. She said, she doesn't want me there. And she said, yes, she does. And when she brought her to the funeral home, it was just her friend with her mother's urn. No one else showed up. And her friend, when she saw her, was a little angry, like, what are you doing here? And she said, honestly, there's no place I'd rather be. And they were able to repair their friendship. And her friend said back to her, I'm glad that you came. I needed you. Sometimes we are so stubborn in our heart and in our mind that we feel like we can carry everything alone, that we end up like that guy in the story in the beginning that I shared, that someone might come along to help. God has sent things and people to help, but we don't take the burden away from us because this is our burden and we know what to do with it, and we've learned how to carry it. Even though it's crushing us, we would rather deal with that than have God take it away, than have God bring someone to help us carry the load, because we don't know what will happen afterwards. Some of us have become so identified by our burdens that they've become part of our personality trait, that we are that person that doesn't need help. We are that person that can juggle it all, that it is beneath us to accept help, even if it's from God. Well, I hate to break it to me and everyone else, because God spoke to me first, believe me. God is not beneath us. His help, his calling, none of that is beneath us. His yoke is indeed easy. 1 John chapter 5 verse 3 says, loving God means keeping his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. Now, anyone who has tried to follow Christ has definitely had moments, or maybe you're still in the moment of, following God's difficult. But let's look at these commandments, okay? Starting in Exodus chapter 20, verses 3 to 17. You must not have any other God but me. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or an image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected, even children in the third and fourth generations of those who reject me. But I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commandments. Before I go on to the rest of them, this first one, it's not just, worshiping another god as in the thought of, Buddha or whatever. All the other fake gods are escaping me right now. But we need to be mindful of what we are replacing God with. The times that we could be reading the Bible or going to him in prayer, or if God is asking us to do something and we're putting the TV, whether it be a specific show or a movie or all of it in general, or video games, or reading other books. And it's not to say that these things are bad, but if they're getting in the way and you become so obsessed with a particular hobby or thing that you will do that before you do anything for God, that has become a God in your life. And it's time to stop worshiping that God. Because even though, and again, God spoke to me first, one of the most relaxing things to do for a lot of people is to just zone out in front of the TV, watch a great movie, sit and read a book. While these things aren't wrong, in moderation, but if they've become your God, the TV, the book, the authors, the actors, whoever, whatever the hobby or whatever it is that's taking up all of your time away from God, those people can't get you into heaven. They can't help heal your broken heart. They can help you escape for a while, but they can't really heal or fill that hole in your heart. Only God can. Moving on to the next one. You must not misuse the name of the Lord your God. The Lord will not let you go unpunished if you misuse his name. That can be a really hard one for a lot of people. I know there was a time period where I was around quite a few people when I was younger that were definitely not Christians, and God's name was thrown on a lot, but not in prayer. And when you're young and impressionable, it can be very easy that when, you stub your toe, the first thing you say is God's name, but not in the right way. We need to be careful because God's name is holy. And it's really not difficult to train yourself to replace God or Jesus's name with something else. I'm partial to saying biscuits when I stub my toe, or biscuits and gravy. So much so to the point whenever I'm frustrated and I just say biscuits, my little brother will look at me and say, and gravy. You gotta learn to laugh at yourself. But again, this is something that is easy. It just takes a little bit of practice and training. Continuing on, it says, remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them, but on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. God wants us to rest. He didn't need rest when he created the world. He rested so we wouldn't say, hey, you just created and kept on going, so I can too. No, he knows that we need rest, and he didn't want to give us any excuse. Resting really shouldn't be a yoke that we fight. It's easy. Continuing on, honor your mother and father, then you will live a long, full life in the land the Lord your God is giving you. This one can be a difficult one if you have not had either or both parents in your life, or if they have at any time been abusive. Sometimes the only way that you can honor your parents is from a distance. To understand that they are human, they're not perfect, and that God placed you with them for a reason. Now, I know that is a tough pill to swallow, and I'm saying that not lightly. It is very difficult, the most difficult thing when you grow up believing in your heart based on actions that your parents, one or both of them, do not love you. because that's what a parent's job is to love their children. Not everyone gets blessed with that. And I came to the conclusion, for me personally, that, and it took years of praying, some rebelliousness, that honoring your parents is sometimes backing off. Because if you're around them and all you can't control your anger and your heart is hardened, and you know that when you're around them, you're not going to be able to honor them, the best way to honor them is to pray for them and keep your distance until God changes their heart, which unfortunately sometimes that doesn't happen because they remain stubborn. Or until God gives you the strength to try again. It's tough because there are a lot of people in the Christian community who have the idea that it's your family, it's your blood. If you know, you know. If you've been through it, you understand how difficult it can be to keep someone in your life. But God did not call us to be a doormat. He called us to be as gentle as doves, but wise as serpents. And if you're grown and you know that being around a relative, whether it's your parents, grandparents, siblings, whatever, is not a safe environment, it's not an environment where, there are a lot of us that even when we become saved, if we go and are around certain blood relatives, where as strong as we are in Christ everywhere else, we revert back to that child who was neglected and or abused or whatever the case may be. If it's harming you spiritually, honor God, your Father, and honor your earthly family by taking yourself out of the picture. No fights, no throwing things in people's faces. Just back away and pray for them. Genuinely pray for God to make a breakthrough. Going on, you must not murder. I feel like this is an easy yoke, even though some people test our patience and we may joke about it. But this is a pretty easy commandment to follow. You must not commit adultery. You must not steal. You must not testify falsely against your neighbor. You must not covet your neighbor's house. You must not covet your neighbor's wife, male or female servant, ox or donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. Now, this part is difficult for some people, especially if you're struggling, whether it be financially or with family problems, and you see other people, it seems like they have everything. One thing that helps and makes this yoke easy is we have no idea what goes on behind closed doors. Not really. Some people might have all the wealth in the world, but have a terrible home situation that no matter how many trips they go on or how many things they buy, it doesn't replace the love that they are not receiving or the kindness that they don't experience. Whereas you, with your humble home, it's full of warmth. Or what? These are just basic examples, but you know where I'm going with this. And then we get to the New Testament, Mark chapter 12, verses 28 to 31. One of the teachers of religious law was standing there listening to the debate. He realized that Jesus answered well, so he asked, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" Jesus replied, "The most important commandment is this: Listen, O Israel. The Lord our God is the one and only Lord, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. Why then do we view his yoke as difficult and his burden as heavy? Once again, it comes back to us. It's our yoke that's choking us. If you have ever had a puppy, or if you've ever seen, which I'm sure you have, whether it be a cartoon or a TV show or a movie, that puppies are excited and all they want to do is run. And when you try and take them for a walk, they are the ones who end up walking you. And I remember our dog Sadie, that when we were training her, she was just so hyper and full of love and wanted to go everywhere. And we had on one of those training collars that every time she pulled too hard, it would choke her a little bit. And then she learned from that to, if I follow where they're leading by the leash, I won't hurt myself and everything will be okay. She's still got stubborn from time to time, and she's my sister's dog now. Sadie's still alive, just as a little disclaimer. And I'm not trying to compare us to dogs, but that's the imagery that God gave me. We're stubborn. We want to go and do this and do that. And sometimes God gives us a vision of what we're supposed to do, and we get so excited by it that we want to be at this end result that God has given us in our head, forgetting that there are steps and stuff we have to take, that we end up taking the leap too soon and not following God's guidance every step of the way. And then when it fails, we feel horrible and like we haven't heard him right, or maybe we didn't hear him at all, and then it feels like we just have this absolute heavy burden. And then the guilt and the fear that we put on ourselves, that we just have this imagery that God is more likened to Zeus in Greek mythology, with the lightning bolts ready to strike you down every time you do something he doesn't like, and that's not who God is. We assume so much about God and about other people that we make things difficult. How many relationships have we damaged or lost because we've assumed what someone else thinks or how they feel? No matter how similar you are to a person, there's always going to be differences. Your perspective is not the end-all be-all, but we serve an omnipotent God who knows all, past, present, and future. And if he is leading you to do something, if he's leading you to talk to somebody, there is a reason for it. And even if it seems like it doesn't go well, God says to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move on. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to lie awake at night and think of all the ways that we could have said and did things different. If we did our best, we just follow God's yoke to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and move on. Just because God calls us to do something or talk to someone about something and it doesn't go well, doesn't mean it didn't serve its purpose. I know I've shared this story before, but God is bringing it to my mind again. When we had one of our first events after we got in our building after the church fire, it was a harvest party, and that was our biggest event always. All the kids in the neighborhood would come out, and we would do crafts, and play games, and decorate pumpkins, and have hay rides, and all of these different things. And that first year, after not having done it for 2-3 years, was we had 2 kids. And I thought for sure that all of my volunteers who were kids that had just graduated out of my youth group would leave. But they didn't. They did all the activities with the 2 kids who came. They put in all of their enthusiasm. And those two kids had a blast. And a lot of people would look at that and would still say it was a failure. So what? Two kids had a good night. They probably would have had a good night even if they went home, if you just gave them the candy bags that you had with the tracks in them. One of those kids had a baby sister who had died from SIDS a month before. And she had said several times throughout the night that this was the most fun that she had had and the happiest she had felt since her sister died. I would have rather had 1,000,000 harvest parties and outreaches just like that than have one that looks successful by human standards with a bunch of people that were just there for free food and didn't get anything spiritual out of it. It's our own assumptions, guilt, the way we think things should go, that is difficult, that crush us, that make us weary. We've got to stop blaming God for how things are and realize that there's a reason. And again, I do not say this lightly. I know that I'm young, but in my 35 years of life, I have been verbally abused, emotionally abused, mentally abused, sexually abused, abandoned, neglected, betrayed, gossiped about. And I've been at that place where I'm like, was I not supposed to be here? Am I only here for people to get out their anger on? I don't understand. I struggled a lot with harming myself when I was a teenager. And the day God finally broke that was the same day that He called me to be a youth minister and to begin my seminary studies. And then God showed me how He could turn all of that brokenness, all of that pain, to help other people. There were so many kids that were hurting that just being able to have someone to listen to them and to understand, really, truly, not sympathize, but empathize with what they had been through, spoke volumes. And that is nothing on me, because the only way I survived any of that was because my grandparents took me to church every Sunday, paid for my Christian schooling, and we're constantly talking about God at home. We prayed every night. And that's not to say I didn't experience trouble in church and Christian schooling, because I definitely did. But I'm saying all of this, sharing all of this, my testimony that God has given me, because it's the only thing I can testify to. I can't tell anyone else's story, especially not without the permission. But I can say with confidence that God was able to bring me through all of that. That there were so many nights when I was in those abusive situations where I would be literally crying myself to sleep while praying, God, I don't know why this isn't stopping. Please make it stop. And I would feel comfort. And that's not to say I didn't have times of anger and times where I read that verse or it would be brought up in church or in school and I'm like, you know, I love God, I talk to him, but nothing's easy. The more that you get to know him, the more that you cling to the hem of his garment when it feels like everything else is falling apart around you and you can't take anymore, the more that God will give you rest. The type of peace in these situations that are beyond our control, or even situations we've gotten ourselves into, that he will be our hope and stay until the breakthrough comes. And he will guide us to the people who need help. So the people who just need someone to listen and understand. To the people that have been nothing but kicked down and to be lifted up again. We are his if you have Christ in your heart, you are his representative, his reflection to the people of this world. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. And if it doesn't feel like either, then it's time to stop and examine what we're holding on to. Because we are, if you're saved, we are on the metaphorical back of the truck. And we need to find out what we're still carrying on our back that we just need to set down and let go of. And sometimes we need to do that multiple times, because a lot of times we like to pick that right back up because it's what we're used to, because it's what we know, because we want to prove our strength and that we don't need anybody. We need to check our bags at the door and stop fighting against his yoke and allow him to make our burdens light.